Hi, everyone. Welcome to Genealogy Adventures. I'm Brian Sheffy.
And I'm Donya Williams. How y'all doing? I have to smile so I won't cry. Hey, everybody. So, yeah, we have a great show for you guys today. We're going to talk with Tamika Middleton. Tamika Middleton is the managing director of Women's March. She is an organizer, a doula, a midwifery apprentice, writer, and an unschooling mama who is passionate about and active in struggles that affect Black women's lives. Tamika has organized for abolition, reproductive justice, and for domestic workers' rights. She is a founding member of the Metro Atlanta Mutual Aid, acronym is MAMA, Fund and Just Georgia Coalition. She serves as a movement-led advisory board member of Cypress Fund and the Grove, a community advisory board member of Critical Resistance, a leadership team member of the Kindred Southern Healing Justice Collective, and as a member of the training team for Bold, Black Organizing for Leadership and Dignity. Welcome, welcome, welcome to the show. The way I want to be a part of the Metro Atlanta Mutual Aid now, just because this says mama, I'm all in.
I love it. Thank y'all so much for having me.
Yes, thank you so much for joining the show. And Lucretia, yes, correct. Sorry, I completely forgot to say that. Happy Black History Month. Officially.
Yes, officially.
It's officially here. So, as our for those of you who are new to the show, but as our long-term audience knows, this is our eighth season, and every February, every Black History Month, we go off slightly, usually the strict topic of at least genealogy, but we always incorporate some aspect of Black history. So that's kind of where this show falls in. It's almost a twofer. It's almost a prelude of Women's History Month, right here in Black History Month. Um, Tamika, the first question that I had for you is just for the audience's benefit. How long have you been associated with the Women's March, and how did you start with that relationship?
Yeah, I joined the Women's March team in 2021, shortly before the Dobbs case hit the Supreme Court. So, right before that case that has now resulted in the dismantling of our right to access abortion. And so I came in as an interim position as the interim deputy director, filling in for one of my beloved longtime organizer friends, and then stayed on especially to support the reproductive justice organizing and the organizing around abortion access, because I have been doing that for so long. But I've been organized and I've been in social movement work for 20 plus years. And so I had built some relationships with some of the folks on that team. And when they needed someone to step in, they reached out and asked me to come join the team.
Excellent. And when we were in the green room, actually, I'm gonna ask that question later. For those who are unfamiliar with specifically Black women's activism in the
Mhm.
United States, I don't expect you to give the whole history because that would be like Encyclopedia Britannica. Um, but could you give like a top line overview of just how long African American women have been active politically and socially in this country?
I mean, I think about the reality of Black women's resistance being dating back to the very moment we hit these shores. Right, there has not been a time, a second that we have been in this country that we have not been resisting. Right, and we can think about that resistance, the way in which that resistance showed up in the small ways, in the small acts of resistance on the plantations. The small work stoppages and refusals, the refusals to bear children. For me, as someone who is a birth worker, I think about the ways in which folks were leveraging plants to say, actually, I'm not going to have kids that are then going to become enslaved. And so I think about that, and then the reality. We go back to Sojourner Truth. We go back to all of those, to Harriet Tubman. Sort of, iconic in terms of Black women's resistance and activism. And I think about all of the Black women who played a number of different roles in the Civil War, right? And so there is a very long history of resistance. One of the people who I think about as an icon is and Anna Julia Cooper, and like her activism for Black women and girls, and especially as it relates to education. And so we have this like very extensive history in every sort of aspect of resistance. We think about labor and worker rights, and we can go back to the washerwomen strike in the late 1800s here in Atlanta, and Black women coming together and saying, actually, we are going to stop. We are going to fight. We are going to strike until we can get some agreements here. And that strike actually spinning off in all these other groups of workers saying, oh, wait, we actually going to get in on this too, right? And then we come more temporarily and all the other ways that we have resisted and been active in the electoral arena, but in every sort of way that a woman or that a person could register our dissent, in every single way a person could participate in democracy, Black women have been there.
Cool. And it's funny, you just made me realize I just literally had a kismet moment, and I have goosebumps. And because at the museum here in downtown Charleston, the International African American Museum, my department, Center for Family History, we're having screening of documentaries. And it's the 15th of February in the evening. We're screening the 1969 film I Am Somebody,
Mm,
which was the 1969 Black women's hospital worker strike. 14,000
hmm
people came out and marched through downtown Charleston. And again, there was Black women
hmm
who really led on that march.
And it's super interesting. I think when I think about the history of labor organizing and of Black women's worker organizing, there are so many ways that we were not supposed to be inside of that story, right? There are so many ways that we were left out of that story. Even when we think about the history of unions and the New Deal and the way in which the all those New Deal labor acts were written in a way to intentionally exclude Black workers, especially in the South, so that domestic workers weren't included, farming workers weren't
Mhm.
included, and still Black women and Black folks still continue to resist and still continue to write their own narrative inside of that history.
And the other side of the coin is the only reason why those legislations like Social Security passed is because they got rid of two of the largest kind of Black employment sectors,
Hmm.
specifically home workers.
Yep.
Once we're like, yeah, well, okay, it's not going to apply to them. They're like, oh, okay, good. We're good to go. The Black people don't get it. We're good to go.
Exactly, exactly. Like those negotiations with white, and I mean, I'm going to draw a parallel. The ways in which the folks who were advocating would sacrifice Black folks in negotiations with white supremacists is not. They did not end. That is still very real.
My feeling is, and Donnie, if you can chime in, is I feel as though Black people are always the first pawn to be taken off the board. Oh, it's Black people hanging this up? Okay, we'll just take them off.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I mean,
And yeah.
that's seen in everything that we do. Every riot, in every protest, in every, even even when you look at the Montgomery the when not the Montgomery bus boycott, the Woodrow the counter boycott,
Mm-hmm.
they poured on the Black people first. Even
Uh,
the Black people got it first. So it's just, hmm,
you
yeah,
froze.
it's just everything. Am I back?
You're back. You're back.
Okay. But the Black people got it. They all got it first. I was saying, from the lunch counter. I don't know if that part was heard, but yeah, I mean, even we got it there. Then when you go all the way back to with the right to vote, with women the right to vote, those deltas were standing strong. They were standing strong, but they was like, oh yeah, y'all, we just need y'all for numbers. I
Mm-hmm.
would see. God knew when He pushed me, where He placed me, what time period. But in the
and,
same time, now I'm kind of being forced
and
to
Tamika,
be in it again, and it's crazy to me.
and you just reminded me as well that the history of slave rebellions in this country, I can't think of a single one that didn't involve enslaved women. So from the Stoner Rebellion to the 1811 Rebellion in Louisiana, was that the German coast? Is that what it was called? I just know it happened. We had Yaya Gordon on the show a couple of seasons ago to talk about that. Down to I can't think of a single to Nat Turner in the 1830s. I cannot
Mm-hmm.
think of any rebellion that didn't involve Black women.
And I think throughout the
Yep.
Americas, right? Like I think people talk about the Haitian Revolution so much, and they leave out Cecile Fatiman as if she was not central and core to the launching. If she was not, as she was not there at Bois Caimon alongside, the folks who get credited with the Haitian Revolution. And one thing I remember going to Haiti and being like, oh, they put the Black women revolutionaries on the money too. Wow, that is, that's a different approach. But I think, yeah, wherever we have been, we have never not resisted.
Yeah. And Donegie, you can fill in the blanks on this one. Even political violence, even in the 1800s, even though women couldn't vote, they still got killed. There's a very famous rebellion, voter registration massacre that happened in where the part of South Carolina that Donnie and I are from. That's the part. Is it the Phoenix or the Parksville riot that South Carolina doesn't like to talk about?
That's the Parksville riot.
The Parksville riot. Poor woman, her name is Martha Good. She was washing the dishes. Her little infant daughter was by her feet. The white men, there was a whole voter repression massacre. Black men were just being massacred everywhere. But the people just continue wilding. This poor woman's washing her dishes and gets killed because a bullet came through her window. So it had nothing
Oh
to do.
No, that was Phoenix. That was the Phoenix riot.
That was Phoenix.
That was the Phoenix riot. Yeah, with Miss Good.
So Black women didn't even have to be on the front lines to still get the adverse effects of the kind of a wider scenario.
Yeah, it's the exact thing that happened to Breonna Taylor.
Right. I'm from South Carolina, but I live in Georgia. I have lived in Georgia for some years, and one of the incidences that they commemorate annually here is at the Folsom Bridge, the lynching of Mary Turner, who was pregnant, very pregnant, at the time of her lynching. And so, yeah, Black women are not exempt from the impact of white supremacy, and we are definitely not exempt from the resistance to it.
Mm-hmm. And as another foundation to the discussion that we're going to have, all right, because while we've been speaking, I've been mulling over the best filtered way of saying what I want to say. And it's about the decency conversation that we're having in the green room. So my feeling is that as soon as specifically Black Americans speak out about mistreatment, systemic racism, and just asking non-Black people to just be decent human beings and to treat us decently, we're automatic. And it's as old as this country is itself. We're automatically deemed to be radical. Mm-hmm. Why is that word applied to a group of people just asking to be treated in a decent human fashion?
I think that Angela Davis has this quote where she says, radical means from the root, right? Like, it's not radical. It means that you actually have to go to the root of the issue and transform a thing from the root. And I think that is the thing, is that, yes, we are asking to be treated decently, but in order for that to become commonplace, it requires a radical transformation of the way in which this country functions. It requires a radical transformation from the root of the values of this country. If at the root of this country sits racial capitalism, if at the roots of this country sits genocide and enslavement, then in order for us to have Black folks, Indigenous folks, to have basic human rights, to be treated with basic human decency, it requires a radical uprooting of the very fabric of this country, because this country is built on treating us as subhuman. It's built on justifying our enslavement and our oppression through not just a system, but also through the culture, through a culture in which they have consistently and continuously painted us. We just there's this conversation that's happening now with the confirmations, with the Robert F. Kennedy confirmation in particular, where he's bringing back all this like racial science, pseudoscience from way back when he's like, yeah, they don't need vaccines because their immune systems are different, right? And folks are like, but why is that negative? And I'm like, it is a negative because it is rooted in a particular kind of racial narrative that was used to distinguish us and our as less human than white folks. And so that is a part and parcel of the fabric of this country. It is why, if you look at the history of obstetrics in this country, it is why, these doctors were able to say it's okay for us to experiment on these Black women's bodies, these enslaved Black women's bodies, with no pain medication, and to test out techniques and tools because they are less human. And so that is a thing that we have to contend with. It does require a radical transformation in this country. And I think there is a way in which we rely on, a bit of electoral and, sort of band-aids. We've gotten used to this country putting band-aids. And band-aids cover a problem for a time, but eventually the band-aid has to come off, right?
Yeah.
And so in order for us to actually be treated, yes, thank you, Nikki, in the comments, Dr. J. Marion Sims, the name was escaping me. But in order for there's not really just a question of a wound healing, right? There's not a racial wound. It is the body of this country that is white supremacist. And so it requires a radical transformation of this country in order for us to even have, of course, Malcolm X talked about, you said, we're not fighting for civil rights, we're fighting for human rights, because we want beyond what this, the rights of this country. And so in order for us to have those basic human rights, we actually have to do some transformation work.
Okay. The last kind of question, general question I have is, do you see in history that Black women who are outspoken and lead movements are treated differently or the same than Black men who operate in the same sphere?
Oh, that's such an interesting question. So I would definitely say that Black women's contributions to movement, to resistance history, become invisibilized in a lot of different ways, right? If we think about the Montgomery bus boycott, and we think about the reality that, say, for instance, a Joanne Robinson, who is the one who began the planning for this boycott months before it actually happened, who made all the flyers, back in the day when it wasn't as simple as doing a thing on a Canva and running it through a copy machine, right? And then who stayed up and made sure that those flyers got disseminated. We do not hear about Joanne Robinson. We do not learn about Joanne Robinson, right? I think about so many of our movements and erased because of the reality of misogyny. And if you think, there's a video you can find on YouTube of Ella Baker talking about her time on staff at SCLC, and she talks about the misogyny that she experienced, even though for us, we think of Ella Baker as an icon, but many people still don't know Ella Baker's story. But she talks about, even in the face of, these other movement icons, the way in which they treated her not as a comrade, not as an equal, not as a partner in the movement, but really as a secretary, as somebody who they could, task with things. And I think that was, so I think that absolutely Black women's contributions are treated differently.
Girl, you got me over here like, dude, I'm just snapping it out because, baby, you got it going.
So I have a feeling, Donnie, buckle up, because here it comes. When I think of the foundational relationship between Black women and white women in this country, leading into the Women's March, it's a relationship defined by wet nurses, mammies, housekeepers, maids. Does that dynamic, that ancient, centuries-old dynamic, does that bleed into the modern day with women from different ethnic groups coming together to fight a common cause? And if you do you think that's bled over into other communities of women, like Asian American women? And yeah.
Yeah, I mean, listen, we got to deal with anti-Blackness all the time in every sphere, and the legacy of anti-Blackness between and amongst us, especially if we are serious about building, for me, I'm like, what is a multiracial mass movement to transform this country look like, right? So I think, yes, there are, very much ways that all of us are, what do I want to say? All of us succumb to the reality of anti-Blackness. We talk about that it's like when we say when a fish is in water, it doesn't know it's in water, right? It's just that's just the reality. And the anti-blackness is the water, right? It's in the air, and so we're all so we're all always breathing it in and trying to function in and through it. And at the same time, we've always also had co-conspirators who are white women, right? We've always there, there's a Viola Lusos of the world who died inside this in the civil rights movement. There's always been kind of co-conspirators and the Ann Bradens of the world. And so we have to not find the co-conspirators. I don't think that's our role. I think our work I think their work, the work of co-conspirators is to come to us, right? But I also think that is true. I think that the dynamics of this country make anti-blackness right in every single community, and not just anti-blackness, but the homie Moya Bailey who said misogynoir, the very real way that anti-blackness and misogyny come together to impact Black women's lives and impact the way that people treat and react to and relate to us. And so, yes, I think absolutely it bleeds into the modern day. It happens all the time. I am Women's March. I think there's a misconception of Women's March in terms of who runs and leads the organization. We literally only have one white person on our staff. Like, we are a team of women of color, primarily women of color. And we have a base that is very white. There's a ton of white women that show up whenever we put out a call, right? And sometimes those dynamics can be interesting. And what I know is that it is not everybody's role, but part of my work inside of that organization is to invite folks into change. Is to invite folks into challenging the assumptions and the ways in which they interact with us. And me in particular, often, sometimes I'm like, hold up, boundaries, friend. But that is a part of the work that I have taken on in this role. I do not, there was a point in time where I'm like, my work is actually with Black folks. And that was the work that I did, and in the role that I am in now, I have taken on a different body of work. And I don't say that work is for everybody. I don't say everybody has to organize multiracial bases. That's not going to be everybody's jam. It's not everybody. You got to have a certain level of patience, a certain level of willingness to be in that with folks. But I do strongly believe that Black folks only make up 13% of the population, right? Like, we actually somebody has to be building a multiracial mass movement. Somebody actually has to be bringing together folks across race in order to actually make that transformation happen. We cannot win an election with just Black folks. It just ain't gonna happen, right? And so we have to be doing it.
So I do want to give you
Can I jump in for a second? I want to jump in.
Yeah, I just wanted to quickly give a shout out because I realized I phrased something slightly wrong. One of the saddest conversations I had on TikTok today was I actually mentioned Joan Mulholland, who is the civil rights activist. Because white ladies, European American women were asking, how can we support Black women in these times? And I said, be Joan Mulholland, and they didn't even know who that was.
Mm-hmm. That's sad, and that's actually the slogan for him: be a Joan. For her, when is what she, as far as what she's done and who she is as a person and all of that. But everything that you're saying really kind of makes me want to now go into what we were discussing before the show, and that was how originally I was like, why is she doing this? What is her reasoning? She know we supposed to be sitting to the back. Why is she standing up here with these people and doing these things and all that other stuff? And no, girl, sit down and take a break, take a rest, because we've been there, done that, and wrote the book on it, and they still not listening. So it is what it is. But then DEI, these executive orders started dropping, and they was just coming in every direction. And I was actually a part of the Facebook group for the Black. It used to be called Black Woman for Kamala, and now it's called Black Woman for Her. And I started to feel like, I started to say to people, I'm like, hey, yo, okay, I get it. We resting, we chilling, but what are we going to do about our families? What are we going to do about our Black communities? Mm-hmm. How are we going to help them? What is the direction we're going as far as they're concerned? Because I'm trying to tell you, I'm looking at these orders and I just don't see me sitting down too much longer.
Mm-hmm.
Not, I'm not even joking with you. And the fact that they could come back and say, "Girl, don't even worry about it," that means that y'all really not for her. As far as politics were concerned and what was going on, you was just for her because she was Black woman. I don't need that. I need you to understand and know what it is. And it was at that point and at that moment that I understood the work you were doing, the direction that you were not. They're not really about us. They're not really about who we need to be and the movement that we have to make. And it hurt me that that happened that way. But with all of that being said, and although you've answered most of my question with everything that you're saying, I'm just in awe with you. And I really want to know what is continuing to keep you pushing in the manner that you're going. Because I'm
Can I
just
just
in
give
awe with
a
you.
little bit of,
Whew.
just a tiny bit of background on that question for people? I'm sure most of our audience is aware of it, but for those of you who aren't, so after the election, we know that 92% of African American women, Black women, voted for Kamala, 80% of Black men. And when the results came in, and I'm not saying that, and everyone who said that they were our ally, who didn't look like us, didn't turn out for us. So those 92% of Black women just said, we're done. Don't call on us for the next 4 years for nothing, because we're angry, we're over it, we've been doing this for centuries, we're out. So that's just the context behind the question that Donia just asked. And I know that that must have presented you with some challenges.
Yeah, I mean, I remain super clear in what it is my purpose is on this earth. I remain super clear in that. And the thing that, I remember seeing, there was this meme that was going around, and it was a picture of Black women on a roof and just like sipping tea while the world was burning around us. And I posted something about it on
Yeah, that's my
Facebook.
background on my Facebook.
The thing that I posted something on Facebook recently about it. And I'm like, the reality, if we are keeping it a stack, right? The reality is that we are not going to be sitting on the side watching. We are going to be kindling for the fire, because the way we are positioned in this country, socially, politically, economically, etc., 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 we and our families are going to be the ones burning before they ever burn, right? So that's one thing that keeps me going, is the reality that my folks are the ones that are up and most at risk of what every single aspect of Project 2025. My folks are the ones who are most at risk. So that's one of the things that I hold. But I also, even going into the election cycle, our Women's March's PAC, which is called Women's March Win, which I sit at the head of, endorsed Kamala for president. We pushed out a whole bunch of work. We had a march. People were like, "Why are y'all marching after? Why weren't y'all marching before?" And like, we did. We had 15,000 people in DC on November 2nd. And so when we had only planned for 5,000, 15,000 people showed up because people were actually very engaged, and we had thousands of people who were having conversations, door knocking, etc., over the months before. But when we made the endorsement, one of the things that we were very clear about is that the election, federal and otherwise, is a flashpoint moment, but it's only a moment inside of a larger trajectory. And the reality of the trajectory that this country is on is that we are on the road to fascism. Regardless of who won the presidential, that was not, it was going to slow the trek towards fascism, but it was not going to stop it, because especially in the States, and especially for those of us who live in the South, we have already been seeing authoritarianism and fascism show up in our states, right? And so what we have now is a fascist president who is going to accelerate that march towards fascism. So of course, we wanted to hold the line, but the end game cannot be an election. The end game cannot be a Kamala win. We could not put all our eggs in that basket, because regardless, we were still going to have to be fighting fascism. So no matter who won, we were still going to have to be in the streets. We're still going to have to resist. And one of the things, there's a ton of scholarship on fascism, right, on the rise of fascism. And one of the things that all of them talk about is, well, I'll say two things. One is not to obey in advance. And we see so much of our media, like our institutions, the media, all these folks who are giving up. They are obeying in advance. They're giving up and capitulating to Donald Trump and to the fascist forces. We see it every single day. We're like, y'all not even gonna fight back? Y'all not even gonna discredit nothing? Like, what are we doing? Right? But the other thing is that all our scholarship on fascism talks about and how you fight fascism is the importance of visible resistance. People have to be in the streets. We cannot let them spin a narrative that there is no resistance. We can, even immediately after the election, we heard folks, because he won the popular and the electoral, because they won the Senate and the House and the presidency, you began to see this narrative that that Donald Trump had a mandate, a universal mandate in support of the policies, in support of this MAGA agenda. And we said we absolutely cannot let that narrative take hold. They were telling us that we had given up before people even started giving up. And we're like, we actually have to be visible and make sure that people can see that we have not given up. Make sure people can see that folks are still fighting, that all of the organizations are still active, that people are still going to be in the streets, and that you have to do something. For me, I say you don't have to march. Marching ain't for everybody, right? It's not everybody's vibe. But you got to do something. You got to get in somewhere. And you got to do something, whatever that thing is. We have to be resisting at every single turn. Malcolm X said, by any means necessary. Whatever strategy, whatever tactic, whatever contribution you have to be doing something.
Can I
Listen, wait a minute.
Oh.
She got me ready to jump. I don't know about y'all, but I'm trying to tell y'all, she got me up in here. My arm hurt, and you made me just push it up, girl. Listen. The way you got me up in here ready to, like, just what you need, boo. I will literally, like, oh my God. You are just amazing.
Thank you.
And I'm just, girl, my arm hurt. You made me lift my, oh my God. So I wanted to, before you say anything, Brian, I really, because you actually touched on something that I just touched on this morning, and that is the fact that everything that is going on out here today, all the things that's happening, people are, we're looking at learning, researching on our own. I have yet to really see senators and congressmen actually stand up against what is going on. These things are supposed to be unconstitutional. At least that's what we thought. Mm-hmm. And why are they not doing anything? Because I'm in the process now of trying to start a writing campaign. I have like 5 people that's going to help us with this writing campaign. But in the same instance, I'm like, everybody talking about boycott Walmart and Target and all that. Meanwhile, where are the senators and the congressmen? So my question is, do you guys do something that will train people how to start really giving more information on replacing these Congress people? Because I think that and senators, because I think that that's one thing that's missing is the education of, we hire them, we can fire them.
Yes. That. Listen, I tell people all the time, I'm like, when people think about democracy, they think about elections, right? And when they think about elections, they think about election day. And I'm like, democracy is always happening continuously. Your last engagement with democracy cannot be after you cast your ballot, right? And part of that is that we have politicians, the people we elect, are then accountable to us. And we have to then hold them accountable. That is part of our duty, is to then hold them accountable, not just by voting against them, but by being in conversation with them, in a relationship with them, holding their feet to the fire every single day. And so Women's March does not. I want to say this is important for me to name. The march that we just had on January 18th was called the People's March. And it was because we built a coalition, a broad coalition of organizations from different parts of the social movement. There were labor organizations, there were voting rights, electoral organizations, there were education organizations, all these different organizations, right? And some of them do exactly the thing that you. Now, Women's March, we are the Roddy Little Sisters of the bunch, right? We gonna turn up. And we can teach you how to go protest outside of your legislator's office. We can do that, right? But some of our partners, some of the other organizations in the coalition, absolutely begin to raise to train folks and develop candidates. I would say here in Georgia and in the South, if you don't know or not connected to the Working Families Party, I highly recommend finding out our friends at the Working Families Party. The woman who runs the Southern region is this very dope and very brilliant Black woman. Her name is Brittany Whaley. She's like amazing, and they train candidates. They particularly have a program called Bet on Us, where they train Black women candidates.
Well, we need her on the show, Women's History Month.
Listen, I will connect you to Brittany. I love her down. She's amazing, and she does great work here in Georgia. She's a part of the Cop City vote stuff. If people have been paying attention to what's happening with Cop City and trying to get the referendum. But yeah, there are amazing organizations that do that exact thing, that train people to run for office, that even train you how to run somebody else's campaign. And so I think that is incredibly important. It's an incredibly important point that honestly, a lot of Democratic politicians have resigned themselves to saying, well, I guess we got to figure out how to work with the Republicans. And we're like, no, we actually need you to have some fight in you. We actually need you to have some, to resist as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So one thing that I've also noticed, TikTok has been a revelation. Donnie will tell you I was very reluctant to get into the whole TikTok sphere. And if anyone had told me on my 2025 bingo card, I would be doing live TikToks, I'd have never believed them. But it took this hot mess of a country to get me to do live TikToks. So I ain't happy about that. But what I'm seeing, and specifically from more the European American side of things, is this what I call the damsel in distress syndrome. Who's going to come and save us? Black women need to come and save us. I'm seeing it all, and also in fairness, I am seeing it from some Spanish-speaking heritage side of the spectrum as well. Where are the Black women? They need to save us. Or the other one that blew my mind. There's a whole subsection. What other country is going to come and save us? Why are you looking to Europe to save us? You all did this. This is your mess. You're so used to Black people cleaning up messes that we didn't make. You can't figure this stuff out for yourself. Sorry, I'm getting really angry about that. We have to save ourselves.
Yes.
No one is going to save us. We have to save ourselves. And what is an effective way to get that message out?
Oh my gosh. I mean, first of all, I love TikTok. I'm with you.
I ain't there yet.
On the TikTok wave. I love TikTok. And especially because the young people teach us so much. And to that point, one of the things I find really interesting and that I learned in the aftermath of the election, we're having conversations around narrative and like where our messaging is, right? Like how we counter. Especially in the face of a Donald Trump presidency, where Donald Trump is so very good at misinformation and disinformation. Like it gives very much 1984, where I'm like, oh, people are like, what does that mean? I'm like, it means nothing. It's doublespeak. It's intentional. It's not supposed to mean it. It's supposed to confuse you. What we saw during the campaign, how good, that he really had people believing. Most of us did not, but he had people believing that the Haitian immigrants was eating people's pets. Like very astute at misinformation and disinformation. And also, the billionaires have already aligned behind him, and the billionaires own most of our means of communication and of connection and of narrative building, right? So this conversation around how we talk to each other and how we shift narratives feels so very important. And what I learned also is that when we look at the digital media space, the gap between influence of folks on the right and folks on the left is broad. Like their footprint is so much bigger than ours. The reach that a Joe Rogan has, like we don't have a podcast that competes with a Joe Rogan, right? And so, or with a Breitbart, right? Like we just don't have it. And so that is a big part of what we're trying to be up to, is like thinking about how do we actually compete in the digital, for influence in the digital space. So many of our children are in that space. So many young people are in that space. So that's one thing. I just, it's a little bit of a tangent, but you made
And
me
I,
think of it. It's just,
but no, because you raised a really good point. I just really wanted to say that will always be the Democrats' downfall. And in this, I'm going to say the Democrats are elitist. They didn't want to go on podcasts. Podcasts were beneath them.
mhm,
But
mhm.
then
And
the other thing is this, things like what we're doing right now, what we're doing,
mhm,
how many people are sharing this show? How many
Yeah.
people,
mhm.
especially Black people, how many people are actually, and I'm not coming from for my audience at all. I need y'all to know that right now. I absolutely love y'all because y'all stick through us. Y'all already know what my love is for you. But in general, I post these shows in like 10 different groups, and the numbers online should be way higher than what they are. They're not watching them. They're not paying attention to what they are. They don't want to know. It's like they want to continue to allow the media to feed whatever it is that the media is feeding them. In the process, they're constantly calling the media liars. So if you want to meet, you got to come to at some point, if the media is that much of a liar, why are you still watching them?
Do you know,
Mhm.
Number one, why are you still there?
in terms of what Danya just said, one of my favorite kind of political commentators on TikTok is a former Black dancer who raises his legs as he just has the harshest kind of news summaries. That's where I
Mhm.
get my top news lines of the day before I
Yeah,
actually.
I
and
mean,
it's really a thing of like how we nurture. One of the things that we're working on at Women's March is actually trying to nurture and build support for these folks who make content online, and say, actually, let's build a strategy for how we boost the kind of content that challenges that. How do we boost content with the liberation bent, with the liberation politic, with the feminist politic? How do we actually support each other and flank each other, and not have like all these influencers who are in disparate spaces and they're each trying to build their platform? Actually, how can y'all build each other's platforms together? How can we build the political how can we build a landscape for the kind of political narrative that we want to proliferate? And so I think, yeah, like you're saying, Brian, I think the reality is that we have to think about messaging in different ways than we currently do. I talk all the time about my teenager, my 17-year-old, who when he was younger, he grew up in a house with folks, with organizers, right, for parents. And yet, and still, he would watch videos about wrestling. He was very into WWE. He would watch videos about wrestling, and they would be creeping in this little information about this anti-social justice warriors and anti-feminists, like, and little by little. And I would hear him say things. I'm like, wait, let's have some conversations about about what you're picking up and how you can be discerning. But they are not just thinking, like, they are not always explicitly political. So much of the content that is vibrant on the right is not necessarily explicitly political. They're sneaking it in everywhere. They're sneaking it in when your kids are on Roblox. They're sneaking it in the Twitch chats, all these different things. And it's like very non-traditional ways of thinking about narrative. And so we have to also be thinking very non-traditional. We do have to get out of our bubbles, and like you said, we have to not be elitist about the ways in which we talk, how we talk to folks. I always talk about one of my favorite content creators is a brother named JC Carter. He has a show called The Hopeless Romantic Society. And honestly, it's like he goes on the streets of New York and he asks people, what's the craziest thing you ever did for love? And it'll just be like, it's just fun and funny, like, Black folks talking about romance and relationships. And then he will do something. He will make a video. He got this following he's been building. He has this video series that he calls Whole Civics 101. And he's like, this is how you get a bill passed, but it's through a lens of talking about a relationship, right?
Mhm.
And like, this is how, so it's like very interesting, different ways that will connect with the audience that he's built, right? That
Yeah.
he was doing a thing around talking about the threats to abortion access. And so he's like doing it through his show. He's like, girl, what you think about Geminis? Geminis are crazy, right? If you if you have a baby right now, you're gonna give birth to a Gemini. You better get this plan B, and you better fight back against the abortion bans. Like that is so very different ways to get to get the message across. And I think we have to be very diverse in our ways to get our message across. And I think we have to. I believe in this so strongly that I think we have to go back to organizing basics. And I'm like, we have to stop talking to the people who we already talk to. We have to stop preaching to the choir, to the folks who already have the language, who already have the politics. We can't just be talking to the people who already know the things that we know and saying, oh, wait. And then when we talk to people who already know the things, who feel like they already know the things, then we're like, well, you don't know enough. You need to go read a book. You didn't use that language right. And I'm like, that's not how we bring more people to our side. It's not how we win. And we have to actually be talking in our everyday networks. Like I say, we always talk about the fact that, if we are not organizing people, somebody is, right? So if we are not talking to like white women, somebody's talking to them. It ain't us, it's the other side. And they're organizing them to their side. But also there are all these little ways that like the QAnon memes that look very, they look just about wellness, but really they're pulling you into these QAnon networks and deeper into these conspiracy theories. We have to be like talking to aunties and grandmas on Facebook and saying, hey, auntie, that's actually misinformation. That's actually disinformation. Let's talk about it. How are we talking in our own networks as well?
And the way that this is so rapidly advancing, from Germany to Serbia to the country of Georgia, not the state, but the Central Asian country of Georgia, millions of people are out there on the street. And I'm not advocating for violence, and I'm not advocating for any buildings to be burnt or any of that stuff. Bringing this conversation back full circle, there's a passivity in this country, this kind of stupor that frustrates my soul. It's a time for action. It's not a time for blue bracelets. It's not a time for winter booties. It's not a time for pink hats. That's performance art. You might as well do interpretive dance in the street for the amount of effect that's.
And Brian, I'm so glad that you brought that up, because that actually brings me to another question as far as all of this is concerned. Because when you're dealing with women in general, whether they be white, black, Puerto Rican, Asian, I don't care. One of my biggest issues is the fact that when something is happening with any other nationality or any other race group, we always step up. We as Black women are always there. And not just Black women, Black people are there to comfort, to help, to, do all of these things. But then when it's our turn, it's not happening. How do you, like right now with this whole march, they were like, it was mainly white women that I was seeing coming out saying, y'all should support, how can I get how can I get invited to the cookout? And I'm like, first of all, stop. I was going to say something else, but stop. Because I need y'all to not throw in the cookout, because that means you talking about me being Black. You literally like already attacking me in your own way because you feel like this is the way that you need to speak to me. I need you to stop. Talk to me like you talk to the person on the other side. You know what I'm saying? But in the same instance, how do you guys deal with right now? You got women that's all a part of this, that wants that, but then you lose it. Because I think that's what we as Black women wanted them to feel for this Women's March, to not have somebody actually there. That's what we want you to feel. Because we've been there all this time. We talk about it, we see it, we do it, we handle it, we work on it, and then you don't do nothing when it comes to the next. So now it's your turn to feel how we felt. How do you deal with women who are right now all in for whatever it is, everything that you're doing, and then as soon as it's done, they disappear? Like, how do y'all, because I know you can tell who it is.
Well, again, it's kind of like being in a bad relationship for a woman. You tell your man, you're going to miss me when I'm gone. And then you leave and he starts hollering for you.
Listen, so I mean, I think a few things come up for me in this conversation. And I think one of them is that we are interested. I'm always like, direct folks to the place where they can go do their work. right? Or like, this might not be the place where you got to do your work. Your work is not to come where I'm at the cookout. What are you doing? What are you talking about? Your work is to go do your work, right? And there's a particular work for white folks to be up to. There's a particular work for white anti-racists to be up to, right? And you have to go do your work. You have to build in your communities. You have to build the kinds of relationships where people can trust you. And I think that, Women's March is one of those places where, like, we will be like, hey, we're an entry point. We will help develop you to the point where you can go out and be in these other organizations and you feel like you have a clear politic. Not every place is that place, right? But also, I think the other thing that I'm holding and that I want to be real about is, often I am not thinking about how this is helpful for white folks, right? Or like what I want white folks to feel. I'm generally just not thinking about that. Honestly, I'm generally thinking about what is necessary for Black folks to be free. And for
Mm.
me, I feel like there is not a time where I am like, I can sit down, because I'm always acutely aware of the impact of all this. Excuse me, I'm about to cuss. I am always acutely aware of the impact of all these things on Black folks. And one of the things I have been thinking about in this conversation that Black women have been having is, about sitting down, is like, if it is true, if it holds that we do not believe that these white women will do what is in the best interest of Black women, if we do not believe that white women will show up for us, right? Why then would we trust those white women to be the only ones making the interventions that shape our conditions, right? Everyone has a choice. You can take action, you can sit back, whatever, however you want to move. And the actions that we take or don't take shape our conditions and the reality that we live in and that we have to fight inside of. If I don't trust you, I'm not going to trust you to shape conditions in a way that leads to my freedom. I'm just not going to do it. And so I have to be in the fight at all times. I have to be in the room to shape the conditions that I need so that I can make sure my kids are okay. So I can make sure that my elders are okay, right? So I can make sure I'm honoring the legacy of the ancestors. I very much, as a descendant of the Low Country, I very much see myself as a descendant of the Stono Rebellion. I very much see myself as a descendant of the Denmark Vesey Rebellion. And I cannot imagine not fighting at any point for Black folks and for my freedom. And yes, we can say white women will go out there and we'll see how it feels for them to not have us, but we gotta have us at the very least. We cannot not have us, right? And so sometimes having us means that we have to have. Bernice Johnson Reagan from Sweet Honey in the Rock has this essay. I can't remember the book that it's in right now. It might be in that Bridge Called My Back. I can't remember, but it is about coalitions. And she was like, your coalition is not your family. Your coalition are the folks that you have to work with in order to make a particular intervention, right? And so we don't have to look at these white women as our family. Sometimes we have to be in coalition with folks in order to make the intervention that we want to make. And the reality is, and I also am one of those folks that I'm like, there's all these levels to the ways that folks show up, right? And there's like people who like, allies versus accomplices, etc. And I'm like, I want folks who see their liberation tied up in mine. Those are the folks who I want to be in the struggle with, regardless of what race you are. If you don't see the way in which you can't be free until I'm free, and so we gonna fight for each other's freedom, I don't want to be in the conversation with you. And I'll be honest, there are some Black folks who do not see their liberation tied up with mine.
That part.
There are people of all stripes who do not see their liberation tied up with mine. I am like, whoever sees their liberation tied up with mine, that's who I want to be in a struggle with. Whatever you look like, whatever your background is, if you recognize that you are not free until I am free, and as Fannie Lou Hamer said, nobody's free until we're all free, I don't want to be in the fight with you. And so I listen, and I believe in, and I respect, and I am deeply invested and committed to the reality that there need to be spaces that are Black folk spaces. So I don't never invite nobody to the cookout.
I know that's right. Girl, you are probably I don't know what Brian thinks, but I swear to God, you just made this like my favorite daggone episode. Like I'm sitting over here. First of all, I'm sitting over here beaming like you my daughter, and I'm watching my child just handle you. I know, like you doing it. Okay, you doing the thing, girl. I'm extremely proud of you, like for
Thank
real.
you.
Like, oh my God, you are awesome. And it is just, and whatever, call me. Let me know. You got my number. So, I
Listen,
mean,
don't
I'm
give
at
me the
this,
invitation. I'm an
girl, this
organizer.
is
I will
it.
text you.
This is it. I'm so proud of you. So, I
Thank
mean, Jesus,
So I've got
Lord.
to,
So
I've
we got,
true. I endorse everything that Donia just said. I have thoroughly enjoyed this hour. I can't believe it's gone by so quickly. I do have a slight
yes.
cleanup in aisle 3 to clean up. So when I was speaking about places like Serbia and Georgia, the country of Georgia, they're fighting against fascism which exists in their country. They are not protesting for us. They're protesting for themselves. Same with Germany. They're fighting off the prospect of having a version of Donald Trump in their own country. So all of this stuff going on in social media, going about, oh, look at all of these countries out protesting for the United States. They don't care about us. They have their own issues. So I just wanted to clear up that little.
Yeah.
And I just want to thank you again. And like LaCrissa said, what a way to start off Black History Month, even though this is our second installment, because we always start at the end of January, the last Sunday in January. Baby, you just did a whole preach. And and yeah, I'm just so happy to have gotten to find you and to just know that you are, welcomed us on your show. And anytime you want to come on this show, you let us know, without
Thank
a
you
doubt.
so much.
Mhm.
This was a lot of fun. I'm telling you, I am about to take a month break because we've been running for a good year, and so I'm like, oh, I get to take some time off. It'll be my first vacation in quite some time, and so this is such a great way to like close out and go into because like tomorrow's my first day of vacation, so it's such a great way to like close out. So I appreciate y'all so much.
Thank you so much for being on the show.
Yes,
Okay,
thank
so
you. Enjoy your rest.
Thank
yes, and
you.
don't hang up. So we just want to thank everybody for, joining us, and we will definitely, as always, see you next week, next Sunday.
Until then, I'm Brian Sheffy. Thank you for spending this hour with us.
And I am Donya Williams